Shout out to G-Man Boxing. Where's the piss bottle? It's over there.
Alright people, review of the week time. And we got loads to talk about in this one. We had a lot of cards on last night. We had a DAZN card with Munguia, which we'll talk about. We had the Top Rank bill, we had the Sky card. We also had Daniel Dubois. Let's start with the Sky card. Now, I only seen 2 fights on this card. I seen Jermaine Brown, who's also called G-Man as his nickname, fight Zach Chelli. Okay, and I also saw the main event, Richard Riakporhe. I'll start with the Jermaine Brown fight. Okay, now Brown is someone who I've seen a couple of his fights over the last year, and he actually is quite an impressive fighter. He seemed to have decent ability, decent speed, good boxer, reasonably athletic, but couldn't punch. If you look at his record on BoxRec, he's 12-1 now with only 3 stoppages. And sometimes people who don't have a lot of stoppages, it's not always a direct indication that they don't hit hard. There's obviously some fighters out there who are tremendous punchers, journeymen, but it's just landing that shot consistently. They could probably tear a bag clean off the wall, but a heavy bag's not moving. When you're fighting a moving target, it can be a bit different. With Brown, I get the impression that he just genuinely doesn't have much pop there. And in there with Zach Chelli, Brown started off quite good, but down the stretch, Zach Chelli really got a foothold in this fight. And Zach Chelli's an interesting one, because for the longest while, he was promoted by Frank Warren. He was a Queensberry fighter, and he lost in 2019 to Cody Davis. Now, I remember a bit about that fight. I know he had Davis down in the second round in that fight, and Chelli is quite a good puncher. I know he's only got a 50%, well actually less than 50% KO ratio, but he is a better puncher than that. And I remember thinking, okay, a bit unlucky there. Then he had a fight a year later in Fight Camp in 2020. This was against Jack Cullen, so somehow he went over to Matchroom. Now this fight here against Cullen, he really was unlucky. The Cody Davis fight, he was a bit unlucky in that fight, but that was a closer fight. This one here against Jack Cullen, I don't know how they scored that fight a draw. I really don't. If you've never seen that fight, it was on the undercard of Dillian Whyte Povetkin 1, and he literally beat up Jack Cullen over 10 rounds. Did everything but stop him. I don't know how they scored that fight a draw. I really don't. Then he went into the wilderness a bit. He appeared on Boxer. At least I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, it was Boxer in 20... What year was it? Yeah, it was 2020, because obviously Boxer, those tournaments were going on at the time. And that was with Ben Shalom. So since then, he's been working with Ben Shalom, a Boxer. And he's been looking alright. In there against Jermaine Brown, I believe this was for the English super middleweight title. And, he's getting there, Zach Chelli. He is a much better fighter than I think his record suggests. I know he's only got the 1 loss in the draw, but realistically, I mean, with better judges, he could be, 14-0? Realistically, with better judges, or maybe more, maybe 16-0, because of his 2 losses. So, Zach Chelli versus Brown was a good fight. Again, for the rest of the card, I didn't see any of the other fights. I was kind of going back and forth between the Queensberry card that was on. The Queensberry card had a couple of domestic dusts up. I think it was in the Telford Centre. You want to say about Don King putting on shows that look poor quality. I mean, the empty seats in that place, and that wasn't even a big arena. I mean, it was bad. There was so many empty seats in that arena in Telford, I think it was. I don't know where that is. It's in the UK somewhere. But there was loads of empty seats in that arena. And that was the main event. We had Riakporhe versus Tszyu. Fabio Tszyu. I'm saying that name wrong, as I always do. But that fight was what it was. Richard Riakporhe did what he needed to do. He looked a bit off in the first round, but obviously landed that body shot and took him out, as you do. So that was the Sky card. In terms of Munguia, now see this one right here. I did see this fight against Jimmy Kelly, and I gotta be honest, I expected Munguia to win this fight. I expected him to win it way more comfortably than he did. And some of you might say, well, gee, he got rid of him in the 5th round. Very close. He was having trouble in there. He was having a bit of trouble in there early on from Jimmy Kelly. This fight was fought. Well, both guys weighed in. So this was technically a super middleweight fight. But both guys didn't come anywhere near the super middleweight limit. So I don't know if 165, someone wants to correct me in the comment section, was this a catch weight that they had to weigh higher than 165? Or I should say no lower than 165? I don't know. But Munguia is someone who I think is kind of stuck between middleweight and super middle. I think that his team are kind of looking and thinking, okay, what is there at middleweight? Because look at his middleweight run. It was so unremarkable. I mean, his first fight at middleweight against Spike O'Sullivan, won that in 11. Trio Johnson, who's as old as the pyramids. Seremeta, who was beaten convincingly by Golovkin. And yeah, you can see here a 6-round stoppage. But Seremeta gave him a lot more problems than he did Golovkin. And Rosado, and then he fought Bullard. Very unremarkable run at super middleweight. Maybe they're looking to see what's going on with Demetrius Andre at that weight. Because Munguia, although saying that, a part of it could be that Munguia really is struggling that bad at middleweight, because I remember when he fought Spike O'Sullivan, and bear in mind that was his debut fight at middleweight, and that was in January 2020. There was people who were at that event who seen Munguia, the day after the weigh-in, so on fight night, and they were saying that he still looked in a bad way from the weigh-in, and he was drinking water and juice like it was going out of fashion. So this was someone who moved up from 154 straight to 160. And even after he's moved up, and bear in mind, 6 pounds when you're cutting a lot of weight is a big help, he's still having to drink because he's taken that much out of himself just to make 160. So that was 2 years ago. So obviously now he's probably finding it even harder, because Munguia is only, 25 years old? So he's still got another few years of growth in him. So maybe it's a case of, look, I'm trying my best to get down to 160, but it's a job. And maybe I need to see how I feel at 165. Can I do an extra 5 pounds? If not, 168 is the place for me. Entertaining style Munguia has. He definitely does. But I don't know. I just think he's not pushed on from his run at 154. And his run at 154 wasn't jaw-dropping, but it wasn't terrible. I mean, I suppose you could say Liam Smith was his best win. He fought that... Who did he fight? He fought that guy Brandon Cook. And that was a weird old fight. Brandon Cook had nothing. Like, literally, if you ever seen Brandon Cook versus Munguia, it was on the Canelo Golovkin 2 undercard. Brandon Cook was just someone who was... Nothing he hit Munguia with deterred him. And Brandon Cook, it was a funny one, because Brandon Cook, the first time I ever heard of him was... I don't know if many people remember this. Bit of boxing trivia for you. Brandon Cook was actually supposed to be a Kell Brook opponent, because Kell Brook, after he came back from the Errol Spence fight, 2018, he had the fight against, I can't remember the guy's name, some Ukrainian fighter, in March of 2018, and he was actually going to be the co-main event for Joseph Parker versus Dillian Whyte. The co-main was actually going to be Brandon Cook versus Kell Brook. Kell Brook pulled out that fight. I have a fair idea. No, actually, it would have been after that. Something. I have a fair idea of why Kell Brook was inactive for a while, but didn't happen anyway. And they were actually going to put Cook in there with Eggington. I think Eggington got an injury or something else came up, but he ended up fighting Munguia. Bit of boxing trivia there for you. So his run at 154 was alright, but at 160 he's done very little. Very little. Obviously he got a win over Hogan, but that was a weird one. The Hogan fight really showed me a lot of flaws with Munguia, because Hogan's not a big puncher, but he was able to tag Munguia with, it was a right hand, it was a counter right hand that he was able to land on Munguia constantly for those 12 rounds. And when you're getting hit with the same shot consistently, it means that you have trouble adjusting. So that was the Munguia one. Speaking of other super middleweights, I mean, I haven't seen the full fight yet. I've seen the first few rounds of Edgar Berlanga versus Romero, Alexis Angulo. And early on, now, people were saying there was a bite in here. I haven't seen that yet, but my days. Berlanga's defense is shocking. He made... Top Rank were really hyping him because of the 16-0 with 16 first round knockout streak he was on. But if you look at the guys he was fighting, guys like Eric Moon, Gregory Clark, Aaron Garcia, There was a debutant here, and a couple of debutants actually as well. That's always a worry, because you don't know how good they are, and some of them can be absolutely awful. Berlanga just was just blowing these guys out of the water. The minute he stepped up against Damon Nicholson, he had a tricky fight over 8 rounds. Then he fought Marcelo Carrasas, and I mean, that was on the undercard of Wilder Fury 3. He was lucky to get the nod there. Very lucky. He was down in that fight. He was very lucky to get the nod there. Then he did the Steve Rolls fight. Another really tough fight. And bear in mind, Steve Rolls, he gave Triple G a very tough fight. A very tough first few rounds before obviously getting taken out. He was able to hit Triple G quite consistently. But Triple G, as a middleweight, once he started finding a range and landed that big loop and right, a bit like he landed on, I can't remember the guy's name, but many, many years ago, it was all she wrote. And in this fight so far, he didn't look particularly good at all. So Berlanga's 25, the chosen one, he calls himself. Wow, the chosen one. Will I be choosing him for my When Hype Jobs Face reality documentary, which we'll be doing again this month? By the looks of things, sooner or later, yes I will be, if he carries on the way he is. So that was Berlanga. In terms of Daniel Dubois, now apparently there was other fights on this card, because I actually remember them even saying it after Dubois knocked out Trevor Bryan, that there was 3 more fights on that card. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. That heavyweight, Jonathan Goodry, I think that's how you pronounce it, who lost that split decision to Trevor Bryan back in January, he got a win actually, a 7th round knockout over an undefeated heavyweight, a Don King heavyweight called Darcy Scott, who was 7-0, he was 7-0 with 6 knockouts at the time. And Scott, who is 23 years old, 5'10". That's very small for a heavyweight. Very, very, very small for a heavyweight. And 253. Whoa, this kid. Damn. I'm just looking at the weights here. So this kid's 5'10", and this fight he was 253. I've never seen this kid fight. I must look at him. This fight he was 253. His fight before that, actually similar on the same card, he was 276. He's only 5'10". Jesus Christ. Just when you see a 5'10" heavyweight, you think speed and the fact they're a bit lighter would be their biggest asset. Oh, this kid didn't read that script. So obviously as well, we obviously saw the Bryan Dubois fight, and interestingly, I seen Shane McGuigan mention Dillian Whyte post that fight, post fight, and for me, with 2 things. One, it's a fight that makes sense for Daniel Dubois, because at the end of the day, I think Dillian Whyte's punch resistance is gone pretty poorly, and Daniel Dubois is a very, very good puncher, tremendous puncher. I think that Dillian Whyte has definitely seen better days, and Frank Warren may be looking at Dillian Whyte and thinking, do you know what, now Daniel has this, world title in inverted commas. It's something Frank Warren can use to sell Dubois further, and he may look to think, do you know what, now I've got Daniel, I've got him make believe world title, but I can still build him as world champion. I'm going to put him in there with someone like Dillian Whyte, BT Sport pay-per-view, because Dubois is one of Frank Warren's, golden boys, because Warren's been pushing him since he turned pro as the next big thing in British boxing. So Daniel Dubois versus Dillian Whyte. With Dillian Whyte, they'd have to offer him a very, very, very big amount of money, but I wouldn't rule Dillian Whyte out at all taking a Daniel Dubois fight. And it makes a bit of sense for Team Dubois if you think about it, because it's a fight that, bit of risk, because Dillian Whyte still carries a good bit of power in the left hook, but you have to imagine Whyte's seen better days. And Dubois is not really known for his uppercuts. I know, look, at the end of the day, Dillian Whyte is not a guy who has the slickest defense. He's easy to hit with straight shots as well as uppercuts. The uppercut seems to be a shot he really struggles with. I've not really seen Daniel Dubois is more a right hand kind of fighter. I mean, I know we got the knockout with the left hook, but if you see, his right hand is the shot that has given him most of his early knockouts and most of his biggest knockouts. It's probably the shot that he has the most power in, but obviously Dubois just strikes me as someone who is just heavy-handed, and that's just that. Daniel Dubois is a really, really heavy-handed fighter. So the other card that was it was on Friday, and it was card that was headlined by Yalalov. Yalalov, the Olympic gold medalist, and you know he was the overwhelming favourite going into the Olympics at heavyweight. I didn't like the fact that how many fights did he have? He had about, I think going into that he had like 8 fights, pro fights. I know there was always a bit of and it was going back before even they let you in the Olympics. I think it was like you were allowed 3, maybe 4 pro fights before they changed the rules. So you could have like 3 or 4 professional fights and then you can go back to amateur, whereas now for the Olympics, they just seem to be just like, well, they're letting pros. I remember Hassan and Dam fought in Rio 2016, if you remember, and he got knocked out at light heavyweight. I think he was knocked out early at light heavyweight as well. And I don't mean knocked out, I mean physically, he was knocked out. So I don't really like that, to be honest with you, but they ain't going to change them anytime soon. In terms of Yalalov, he's got wins over Sakalowski. He got the win over Jack Malawi, I think is how you pronounce it, in the 8th round. Very good puncher. Obviously on that card as well, there was George Arias. Now, I remember when George Arias was being talked about early on, and some of you may not know, there's a Brazilian journeyman, and he is a journeyman, with the same name, George Arias. And I was familiar enough with him because I'd seen him in a few, I think he was around the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, as well as recent enough, actually. I don't know when the last time George Arias fought the Brazilian. And I was thinking, did they talk about this journeyman? They're hyping this journeyman up, because I think he was promoted by Top Rank at the time. And I was like, why are they hyping journeyman up? Then I come to find out that it's this guy, George Arias, a Dominican Republic fighter, a fighter from the DR. And at the time, in about 2014, 2015, he was promoted by Top Rank. Pretty sure it was Top Rank anyway. And, he was doing his thing. He was looking all right. He had tremendous energy. That was one thing you saw about George Arias early on in his career. He just full of energy. That's really what he was like. And I quite enjoyed watching him. He's about 5'11", so he's quite short. And he had something about him. Then he just seemed to go pretty much into the wilderness. Pretty much after 2016, he was in a 4-rounder in 2016. And then he just went into the wilderness. And there was nothing happening with George Arias. And it's only really the last couple of years, last year really, when he fought Cassius Chaney, that I seen anything from him. Definitely lacks punching power. Like in his last, how many? 1, 2, 4. In his last 6 fights, they've all gone the distance. 2 of them split decision, and 1 of them was a majority decision against Robert Sims, who's 8-2. It's not a good look. His only knockout in those fights was against Byron Pauly. Now Byron Pauly's an American journeyman. If you've never seen him fight, he's the type of guy you should be knocking out. You know the way there are some journeymen who are durable? Yeah, Byron Pauly's not like that. If you ever seen him fight, he's a big beer keg and he goes in there to get knocked out. That's his whole thing. So it doesn't make you a big puncher if you're knocking him out. So that was George Arias as he fought there on Friday night against Atlanta Green, split decision. I watched that and I was like, what's up with George Arias? Where's the energy? And he's only 30 years old, he's been around for a while, but where's the energy that used to be there? It just seems lacking. And there's been a lot of people on the lookout for shorter heavyweights to come along, and not to say that any of them will dominate per se, but it's strange. It's weird to see, when you see a short heavyweight, especially in the modern era, you kind of hope that they have a bit of something to them, that they can maybe do something, because it is exciting, and a lot of these guys can throw a lot of combinations. If they're a little bit, they're kind of basically a bit too big for cruiserweight, but too small for heavyweight, if you get me. So George Arias, I don't know what he's going to do. I remember a few years ago, anyone remember this guy? They were it was more Instagram that were hyping up a guy called James the Beast Wilson. He was about 6 foot, and they were calling him the next Mike Tyson because he fought kind of real explosive. He had a good uppercut, and he was just jacked up like hell. But he was garbage. Anyone with that kind of physique and that kind of explosive style, a lot of people just tend to get jumped on the bandwagon. And there's a guy for he's never even a hype job in my opinion. But remember him. In other news, has anyone seen the picture of Jarrell Big Baby Miller sparring. So Jarrell Miller released a pic of himself sparring. Now I believe he's got a fight coming up, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And I say Big Baby, sorry, Big Farmer. It's not on BoxRec, but I seen someone share, I can't remember who it was, and it was safe. It's safe to say that Jarrell Miller, he will not be coming in any lighter than 300 pounds. He looked, and this is a big boy, but he looked massive, absolutely massive in the picture. It was crazy. So Miller, obviously, he's still absolutely a unit, and God knows what he's on still, because if you think he's clean, I mean, Big Farmer ain't going to be clean. He ain't going to be clean. So we'll wait and see who he's in there with next. In terms of other news, Anthony Joshua to quit Sky Sports and join rival DAZN. Now I broke this news, and I was talking about this news. It broke on Thursday, I believe, and I was talking about it there. Well, the Telegraph have said that Anthony Joshua was... Now, bear in mind, I take this with a grain of salt. We haven't officially had an announcement on this yet, but it looks pretty much likely that we're going to get there. So, his new multi-year deal with DAZN, multi-fight pack for 2 fights per year, which could see him earn hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 3 to 5 years. It's ambitious to think AJ will be around in 5 years' time. DAZN pay-per-view to launch in the UK with AJ versus Usyk 2. Now, this is an interesting one for DAZN, right? Yes, they need a star like AJ. It will boost their brand tremendously in the UK. It really will help DAZN out. But if they are going to put a huge amount of money into AJ, right, they better hope and pray he beats Alexander Usyk. Because if he goes in there against Usyk and he loses again, and he loses decisively this time, you know, to say the first one wasn't, but say he gets stopped in the mid rounds, we'll say this time, how many fans, and AJ's fans, you've seen it, it's gone, its popularity is still big, but it's nowhere near what it used to be pre-Ruiz. So if he takes another L, and it's a decisive one again, how many of them will stick around? It could be a situation where AJ goes from being a pay-per-view star in stadiums to maybe he'd need the right dance partner to even stay a pay-per-view star. And if DAZN are pumping money into AJ, and fans are saying, look, we're not interested anymore, you know, he's already lost, there's no reason, we like Fury or we like Usyk, and you know, they're not with DAZN, well, DAZN are going to be hemorrhaging money into AJ, and they're not going to see a return. They need to pray he beats Alexander Usyk. They really do. And in terms of actually Alexander Usyk and the winner of him and AJ, it was reported by the Mail Sport that Tyson Fury was actually in talks with a Saudi Arabian rep to potentially face the winner in an undisputed title fight eyed for December 17th, just before the World Cup final in Qatar. Just going off boxing, I really can't get my head wrapped around the idea of the World Cup being in December. It's just so strange. I love this time of year when there's a Euros or the World Cup on, because it's just something to add to the summer. I understand why, but saying that, they can always do, I'm sure them stadiums in Qatar have closed, they can have aircon and you can close the top, I'm sure they could, but hey, that's just football talk. In terms of Fury, I don't believe he's retired. I don't think many people do. He did chive in on this and say, this is all news to me, biggest load of rubbish ever. So Fury's refuting the claims, but I would imagine there probably is a little bit of truth to some of them claims. I really would. I would say there is a little bit of truth to some of them claims. I mean, Saudi Arabia have been looking to, and all that kind of region itself have been looking to put on a lot more of these shows. They've been paying a lot of these fighters crazy amounts of money. Like, I mean, look at how Amir Khan, I think he said he got more for that, whatever that was, against Billy Dib than he got against Canelo. Crazy. The amount of money they're giving some of these fighters down there. And to be honest, at the end of the day, like, you're a fighter, take it. You know, if people are offering you 7 figures for an easy fight, and obviously Fury versus Usyk, Joshua winner is not an easy fight, but you know what I mean, if people like Amir Khan taking it, I mean, someone's basically just say, here's a big suitcase full of money, beat up this blown up featherweight. Alright, I'll do it. That's what people like Khan are doing. In terms of other heavyweight news, Joseph Parker, top of this in the video, signed long-term deal with Boxer and Sky Sports. boxer making moves, as I said. But when you think about it, you're just kind of like, Hughie Fury, Fraser Clark, but he's only just starting his pro career. Who else do they have? Potentially, if Michael Hunter beats Hughie Fury, maybe they could look to do Parker Hunter, because I don't think a rematch between Joe Parker and Hughie Fury will set the boxing world alight. I don't think we'll all be, us people on YouTube, be making videos going, yes, the rematch we all want to see, Hughie Fury, Joe Parker. I mean, the first fight was so good. Do you remember in the, I think it was the Parker one. That's the kind of memories we have of the first fight. So please, Ben Shalom, don't put on Parker versus Hughie Fury 2. I think I speak for most boxing fans when I say no one is getting nostalgic about that. And nor will we be looking to see the rematch. Unless something changes dramatically. We'll see how Hughie Fury looks against Michael Hunter. Moving down a few divisions. I love this fight. I hope this fight happens. Jamel Charlo versus Tszyu now reportedly agreed and will take place as a WBO mandatory for Charlo's Undisputed titles. WBO president has revealed. Wow. Really is going to be a coming out party for Tszyu against Charlo. I mean, talk about a baptism of fire. Going in there for Undisputed in your first world title fight. Well, we've seen people in their first world title fights going in for Undisputed have a lot of success, and arguably should have came out as Undisputed champion in the case of Jack Catterall. So, very interesting. I really like that fight. I mean, Tszyu was one of them fighters when he came along first. I just kind of thought, okay, it's another one of them sons following their dad into the sport. But Tszyu has proven to me that he's a much better fighter than I gave him credit for, certainly at the start. He's been doing very good things, so I will for sure be keeping an eye on him. Definitely. George Kambosos' promoter, Lou DiBella, asked if he expected Kambosos to fight Haney again. He says, I think he's going to exercise the rematch clause. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't. I think the rematch would be difficult for him, but I think he can fight better. He said that with Ellie setback. So the Bella is saying that Kambosos wants the rematch, according to him. I mean, really? Because it's not just the fact that Devin Haney won it clearly. He did. But when a fight is as clear as Haney Kambosos, right? What network is really going to want to put it on? At the end of the day, it's going to be like, will Top Rank and ESPN look at that and think, we're not putting that back on? It would have to be in Australia again, and they're going to look at that and go, we're not putting that on again after the first fight. Unless they're contractually obligated to do so, which if that's the case, I don't know. But I would imagine it'd be hard pressed to get some networks bidding for that fight. Billy Joe Saunders is reportedly getting back into camp and is now preparing to fight again. I did actually see a picture of Billy Joe Saunders, and what was it? It was who was he with? I can't remember exactly who he was with, but he still looks like he's got a lot of weight to take off. So Billy Joe may be in camp, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't hold my breath about seeing him unless it's in a massive fight. I can't see him coming back for anything less than a Eubank or a Golovkin fight. I really can't. I can't see him getting motivated for it either, truth be told. So Eddie Hearn saying Billy Joe's back in camp. We'll watch the space on that. Now here we go. This is one that when I seen it break first, I was like, yes, and then it says negotiations basically fell at the final stage. There was talk of Shakur Stevenson versus Navarrete. Not going to happen now, but when I seen it, I was like, what? Shakur versus Navarrete? The styles would have just blend brilliantly, I think, but sadly we're not going to see that, because it's just been, I only reread it there and I was like, oh crap. In terms of everything else, I think we're good to go on everything else. Obviously, They're on about Ricky Hatton. He's going to fight on the undercard of Hughie Fury versus Michael Hunter. Have an exhibition with Marco Antonio Barrera. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Frampton on Don King versus on Don King's promotion of the Bryan Dubois fight. It was like a Monty Python show. Yeah, it was poor. We'll finish with that. The Don King productions of Bryan versus Dubois. I mean, that arena was not sold out. And bear in mind, that was not a big arena. For a heavyweight title fight, it was tiny. And it just looked so... Oh, it just looked awful. It just looked awful. You know, it was really put on bad. Trevor Bryan came in absolutely horrendous shape. Daniel Dubois had a human heavy bag in front of him who was just moving his head. And the whole show itself, I mean, Don King's been washed up for years. But surely that's the nail in the coffin for Don King and his promoting. Because that was embarrassing. And apparently that was pay-per-view in America. And obviously not on a major network like Showtime or anything like that. But apparently it was pay-per-view. And American pay-per-views ain't cheap. So I'm assuming it wasn't a simple 10 quid, there you go, happy days pay-per-view. It was probably like $40, $50 maybe. God knows. But that's pretty much it. Let me know your thoughts on everything I talked about in the video. Hope you all enjoyed it. It's going to go out tonight probably, not tomorrow morning. We'll wait and see about that. But for now, lads and lassies, I hope you all enjoyed it. Smash the like button if you could. Help me out. Support the channel. It's been going great the last few days. Let's keep that going. Share a video. Get it out there. Let people see it. Hope you have a great Monday. For now, I'll talk to you. Peace.